My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 68 years old and my son, my only child, tried to drug me to steal my life savings. Before I tell you about the moment the police sirens screamed down our quiet Charleston street, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The air in my own living room felt thick, suffocating. It was December 10th, the night my world was supposed to end. Across the polished mahogany coffee table, my son Michael leaned forward, his face a mask of counterfeit concern. His wife, Sarah, sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee in a perfect portrait of support. It was all a lie. "Just sign here, Mom," Michael whispered, his voice smooth and cloying like cheap honey. He nudged a thick stack of papers toward me. "It's just a standard power of attorney. We talked about this. It's so we can help you with your finances. You've been so forgetful lately." Forgetful. The word hung in the air, a deliberate poison dart. My hand, the one I was forcing to tremble, reached for the pen. My gaze drifted to the delicate porcelain teacup on the table, its floral pattern a stark contrast to the ugliness of the moment. The dregs of chamomile tea swirled at the bottom. I could almost taste the faint, bitter undertone they thought I wouldn't notice. I let out a shaky breath, a performance I had been rehearsing for weeks in front of my bathroom mirror. "Oh, Mikey," I slurred, letting my head loll to one side. "I just feel so dizzy. Everything's blurry." I saw it. A flicker of triumph exchanged between him and Sarah. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk on her lips before she smoothed it away. They thought they had me. They thought their plan was perfect. Sitting in the wingback chair to my left was the final piece of their betrayal, a man they introduced as Frank Miller, a supposed lawyer. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a man who haunted bus stations after midnight. His suit was a size too big, his tie was crooked, and his eyes darted around the room, assessing the value of my antiques. I was sure of it. He cleared his throat impatiently. "Mrs. Vance, this is just a formality to protect your assets," he said, his voice slick with false professionalism. "Your son is just looking out for you." Protect my assets. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They weren't protecting anything. They were vultures, circling what they believed was a dying animal. They were trying to liquidate my entire life, the business I built from scratch, the real estate I invested in, the carefully managed portfolio that was supposed to be my legacy. My inheritance to Michael, the one he was too impatient to wait for. They wanted to reduce it all to a signature on a fraudulent document. My eyes fell on another teacup, sitting on the end table next to Michael's chair. It was identical to mine. He had taken a few sips earlier, complaining of a stress headache. Poor thing. Planning a matricide must be exhausting. They didn't know. They had no idea that when Sarah had bustled into the kitchen to prepare the tea, my special chamomile blend to help me sleep, she'd cooed. I had followed her just moments later, feigning a need for a glass of water. In that split second when her back was turned, as she reached for the sugar bowl, I had performed the swiftest, most important magic trick of my life. A simple silent switch of the saucers. The cup meant for me was now sitting right beside him. The clean cup was in front of me. They also didn't know about the tiny, button-sized camera lens peering out from the spine of a leather-bound book on the shelf behind them. Or the other one, nestled in the heart of a silk flower in the vase on the mantelpiece. Every greedy whisper, every condescending glance, every single lie was being recorded. They thought they were the directors of this sordid little play. They had no idea I was the one who had written the final act. "Come on, Mom," Michael urged, his voice losing its patient edge. He took the pen and tried to press it into my hand. "Let's get this done so you can get to bed. You look terrible." The insult, so casual and cruel, was the final drop of fuel on the fire that had been smoldering inside me for 4 agonizing months. The fog of my performance began to clear. The tremor in my hand stilled. I slowly lifted my head, my spine straightening against the back of the chair. For the first time all evening, I looked directly into my son's eyes, letting him see the clarity, the focus, the cold, hard fury I had been hiding. I saw his smile falter. I saw the first flicker of confusion, then alarm, dawn on his face as he realized the confused, dizzy old woman from a moment ago was gone. He pulled his hand back slightly, a nervous twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Mom? What is it?" I ignored him. My gaze shifted to Frank Miller. "Tell me, Mr. Miller." I said, my voice no longer weak and slurred, but as sharp and clear as a ringing bell. Does the State Bar Association know that a disbarred con artist is making house calls? The color drained from the fake lawyer's face. Michael and Sarah froze, their eyes wide with shock. The mask had shattered. The game was over. And you, Michael? I continued, turning my full attention back to the son who had broken my heart into a million pieces. My voice was low, steady, and trembled with a power they had never heard from me before. Before I call the police who are waiting just down the street, there's something you need to understand about the tea you just drank. For months. That's how long I lived in the dark. For months of smiles, of Sunday dinners, of playing the part of the loving mother while my son sharpened the knife he planned to plunge into my back. It all began on a sweltering August afternoon, the kind of day in Charleston where the air is so thick with humidity, it feels like you're breathing water. Life was good then. Or so I thought. At 68, I was comfortably retired. I had built a successful interior design firm from the ground up, a business born from a passion that my dear husband, Robert, had always encouraged. After he passed from cancer 5 years ago, the business felt like a connection to him, but I knew it was time. I'd sold it for a handsome sum, and combined with our careful real estate investments, I was more than secure. I had my beautiful historic home south of Broad Street, my garden, and my son Michael. He was my world. My only child. After Robert's death, my focus narrowed entirely onto him. I had made sure he wanted for nothing. A top-tier business degree, the down payment for his first marketing firm, the beautiful 2-story house in Mount Pleasant I gave him and his wife Sarah as a wedding gift. A house with no mortgage, a fresh start I never had. I saw his success as my success, his happiness as the final chapter of my own love story with his father. What a fool I was. That afternoon I was in my garden, my sanctuary, tending to my prize-winning azaleas. The scent of jasmine hung heavy in the air. I was humming to myself, lost in the simple joy of it, when I heard Michael's voice drift from the screened-in porch. He and Sarah had dropped by unexpectedly, something they did often. Usually it warmed my heart. He was speaking in a low, urgent tone, the kind you use when you don't want to be overheard. I froze, pruning shears still in my hand. It wasn't the words themselves at first, but the panic coiled within them that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I don't know what else to do, Sarah, he was saying, his voice strained. I've tried everything. The guy from the West Ashley group, he's not like the others. He's not going to just send a threatening letter. West Ashley group? It sounded vaguely menacing. I took a silent step closer, my rubber-soled gardening shoes making no sound on the flagstone path. I crouched behind a large camellia bush, my heart starting to beat a little faster. What do you mean, Mikey? Sarah's voice was a nervous whisper. What did he say? There was a long pause, filled only by the chirping of cicadas. Then Michael's voice, barely audible, cracked with a fear I had never heard from him before. He said if I don't have the money by Christmas, they're not just coming for my kneecaps. They're coming for the house. They're coming for us. The shears clattered from my hand onto the stone, the sound shockingly loud in the quiet afternoon. I clamped my hand over my mouth, my breath catching in my throat. The house? Their house? The house I gave them? What was he talking about? How much? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Michael, how much is it? I leaned forward, straining to hear, my knuckles white as I gripped the leaves of the bush. The number he spoke next felt like a physical blow. It knocked the air from my lungs and sent a wave of icy dread washing through me. A chilling counterpoint to the oppressive summer heat. $150,000, he choked out. And that's just to him. I owe others too. All told, it's gotta be over 200 grand. $200,000. The amount was staggering, incomprehensible. My Michael, the boy I taught to balance his first checkbook, the man who ran his own company, was in debt up to his eyeballs with gangsters? It didn't make any sense. I had just given him a $50,000 loan for a business expansion 6 months ago. Where had all that money gone? Where had all the money gone? I stayed hidden, my body rigid, as the full ugly truth began to unravel from his next words. Each one a nail hammered into the coffin of the son I thought I knew. I listened as he confessed everything to his wife, and in doing so, he unknowingly confessed it all to me. The perfect world I had so carefully constructed for him, for myself, was nothing but a fragile illusion. And it was about to come crashing down. I lost it all, Sarah. Michael's voice was ragged, stripped of all its usual confidence. Everything. The 50 grand from Mom for the expansion. That was gone in a week. The company's line of credit, maxed out. I even took out a second mortgage on the house. A second mortgage. On the gift. On the home that was supposed to be their sanctuary, their future. A cold fury began to bubble beneath my shock. He had taken my generosity, my love, and used it as collateral in a game I couldn't even begin to understand. Gambling, Mikey? Sarah's voice was a mix of disbelief and horror. Online? How could you let it get this bad? It starts small, he said, the self-pity in his voice making my stomach turn. A few hundred on a football game. You win, you feel like a king. You lose, and you're sure you can win it back on the next one. The hole just gets deeper and deeper until you can't see the light anymore. And the people I borrowed from, they're not the bank, Sarah. They don't care about repayment plans. They care about making an example out of you. I could hear the clink of ice in a glass, the glug of liquid being poured. He was drinking in the middle of the afternoon. Another red flag I had blissfully ignored. We can't ask her for the money, Sarah said, her voice firm. Your mother, she'll demand to know everything. She'll want to control every cent. There will be lectures, lawyers, it will be a nightmare. She'll never look at you the same way again. Oh, you have no idea, I thought, a bitter taste rising in my throat. I know, Michael snapped. Don't you think I know that? I can't tell her I blew her nest egg and our future on a bunch of pixels on a screen. She'd have a heart attack. But there might be another way. Another way. The words hung in the humid air, heavy and sinister. I held my breath, my ear pressed so close to the leaves of the camellia that I could feel their waxy texture against my skin. What are you talking about? Sarah asked. I have a plan, Michael said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that chilled me to the bone. Listen to me. Mom's birthday is December 10th. She's getting older, you know? She's been more forgetful lately. My blood ran cold. He was using my age, my normal minor moments of misplacing my keys or forgetting a name, as a weapon against me. He was building a narrative. Every night, he continued, she has that chamomile tea before bed. Says it helps her sleep. Frank, you know, the guy who helped with that real estate closing, he told me he can get something. Pills. They dissolve completely. No taste, no smell. Just a couple of them in her tea. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the trellis beside me to keep from fainting. Pills. In my tea. My son, my own flesh and blood, was talking about drugging me. What would they do? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper now. A thread of sound laced with a horrifying mixture of fear and fascination. Nothing dangerous, he said quickly, a little too quickly. It's not like that. It would just make her docile. Confused. You know, a little loopy for an hour or so. Long enough for Frank to come over. He can pose as a lawyer, bring some papers. What kind of papers? Power of attorney, Michael said, the words slipping out so easily it was clear he'd thought this through. A full transfer of asset management. We'll tell her it's a precaution because of her confusion. She'll sign without a second thought. Once we have control, we can liquidate one of the rental properties. Pay off the sharks, get back on our feet. By the time she even realizes what happened, it will all be over. We can even pay the money back into her accounts later. She'll never have to know the worst of it. It was a punch to the gut. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. This wasn't a desperate, spur-of-the-moment idea. This was a cold, premeditated plot. They had discussed my supposed decline. They had a source for the drugs. They had a fake lawyer on standby. They had a date circled on the calendar. I listened as Sarah, after a moment of what I prayed was hesitation but was likely just fear of getting caught, agreed. Okay, she breathed. Okay, Mikey. If it's the only way. I backed away slowly, my legs trembling, my heart a block of ice in my chest. I retreated into the quiet of my house, the scent of jasmine now sickeningly sweet. I locked the back door and leaned against it, gasping for air. The image of the son I had raised, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd helped with his homework, the man I'd proudly watched walk across the stage at his graduation, shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. In his place was a monster. A stranger who shared his face but had a heart full of poison. He wasn't just planning to steal from me. He was planning to violate my mind, my body, my trust. He was willing to risk my health, my life for money. I looked at my own hands, shaking uncontrollably. The question echoed in the silent, empty house, a scream I couldn't let out. Is this my son anymore? The sun set, painting the Charleston sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple, but I saw none of it. I sat in my armchair as darkness fell, the house silent around me, a tomb for the family I thought I had. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Michael's voice, whispering about pills and power of attorney. Grief was a physical weight, a crushing pressure on my chest. But as the long dark hours of the night ticked by, something else began to stir within me. A single hot spark of anger in the cold devastation. He had called me forgetful. He had called me confused. He was about to find out just how sharp my mind still was. By dawn, the grief had receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I would not be a victim in my own home. I would not let them destroy everything Robert and I had worked for our entire lives. I was not some fragile old woman to be pushed aside. I was Eleanor Vance and I was going to fight back. My first call was at 7 a.m. sharp to my lawyer David Chun. David had handled our estate for 20 years. He was sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. David, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I need to see you. Today. It's a matter of the utmost urgency and confidentiality. He heard the steel in my tone. I'll clear my schedule. My office at 10. That was the first step. The first move in a chess game my son had no idea we were playing. But the enemy was still in my camp, still wearing the face of family. 2 weeks later, Michael came to see me, alone this time. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes. He sat on the sofa opposite me, wringing his hands. The performance was about to begin. Mom, he started, his voice thick with fake emotion. I'm in a bit of a bind. I kept my expression neutral, a mask of maternal concern I no longer felt. What is it, sweetheart? There's this investment opportunity, he said, avoiding my eyes. A tech startup. It's a sure thing, Mom. Ground floor opportunity. But the buy-in window closes on Friday. I'm just a little short on liquid capital right now. I felt a profound sadness wash over me. Even knowing what I knew, a small stupid part of my heart wanted to believe him. The mother in me wanted to fix this, to make the monster go away and bring my son back. How much are you short? I asked, my voice soft. 20,000, he said, finally looking at me. His eyes were pleading. It's just a loan. I'll pay you back with interest, I swear. You know I'm good for it. Dad would have wanted me to seize an opportunity like this. He always said, you gotta be bold, son. He dared to use his father against me. The man whose memory I cherished, whose integrity Michael was spitting on with every lie he told. The spark of anger inside me roared into a flame. This was not just about gambling anymore. This was a deep, rotten sickness in his character. I let out a long sigh, playing my part. Oh, Mikey, 20,000 is a lot of money. After helping you with the business expansion, my liquid funds are a bit tight. I saw the flash of irritation in his eyes before he masked it. Of course, Mom. I understand. It's just, this could really be the big one. I stood up and went to my antique secretary desk. I took out my checkbook. My hand was perfectly steady as I wrote out a check. I folded it and handed it to him. He unfolded it, his face lighting up in anticipation. Then his expression fell. His jaw tightened. 5,000, he said, the disappointment evident in his voice. Mom, I said I needed 20. It's all I can spare right now, honey, I said, my voice full of false regret. I wish I could do more. He stared at the check for a long moment. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. It wasn't enough to solve his real problem, but it was still $5,000 he didn't have before. He forced a smile, a tight, ugly thing. No, this is great, Mom. Thank you. It really helps. He folded the check and put it in his pocket. He gave me a quick, awkward hug and left, the fake smile never quite reaching his eyes. I watched him walk down the path to his car, a car I had helped him buy. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I had passed his test. He still saw me as the same old gullible mother, easily manipulated by a sob story. He had no idea that I was testing him too. And he had failed spectacularly. The check wasn't just $5,000. It was bait. I had already spoken to David, and we had a plan in place. That check was now a breadcrumb, the first of many I would lay on the path to the trap I was setting for him. I walked back into the living room, the quiet no longer feeling oppressive. It felt like the calm before the storm. A storm that I was now directing. A sliver of doubt crept in, a whisper in the back of my mind. Was I being too harsh? Was I becoming as cold and calculating as him? Or had I just dodged another bullet, another test designed to see how much more he could bleed from me before enacting his final terrible plan? I pushed the doubt away. This was not about harshness. This was about survival. My next move was to find someone who could walk in the shadows that my son now inhabited. David Chun recommended a private investigator. She's the best in the Lowcountry, Eleanor, he'd said. Tough as nails and discreet as a priest in a confessional. Her name is Brenda Russo. Brenda's office wasn't in a gleaming downtown skyscraper. It was a modest second-floor walk-up over a bakery in a quieter part of town. The woman herself was the opposite of modest. She was in her late 50s with a shock of short salt and pepper hair, sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and a handshake that could crush walnuts. She was a former Charleston PD detective, and it showed. There was no nonsense about her. I sat across the desk from her, the smell of fresh bread wafting up from below, and I told her everything. I told her about the overheard conversation, the gambling, the debt, the vile plot with the tea. I even told her about the recent request for $20,000 and the check I had written. I laid out the broken pieces of my heart on her cluttered desk, and she listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Mrs. Vance," she said finally, her voice raspy but kind. "I'm sorry you're going through this. In 20 years on the force, the domestic cases were always the worst. The things people will do to their own family." She shook her head. "It never gets less shocking." She leaned forward. "Give me 2 weeks. I'll find out who these West Ashley guys are. I'll trace that $5,000 check. I'll dig into this Frank Miller character. And I will get you a complete financial picture of your son. When I'm done, you'll know everything." I left her office feeling a sliver of hope for the first time in weeks. I had an ally. A professional. Brenda was better than her word. Didn't even take 2 weeks. 10 days later she called me. "I have something for you," she said, her voice grim. "You should come to my office." The file she placed on the desk in front of me was thick. It was a meticulously compiled biography of my son's secret life. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. The $50,000 business loan I'd given him had been funneled, within 48 hours, through a series of shell accounts and deposited directly into multiple offshore online gambling sites. The check for $5,000? Cashed within the hour and handed over in a parking lot to a man identified as a known enforcer for a local loan sharking ring. Brenda had a name for the West Ashley Group. They were a particularly nasty crew, known for their violent collection methods. My son wasn't just in debt. He was entangled with dangerous criminals. Then came the information on Frank Miller. Just as Michael had said, he was a real estate guy, but Brenda dug deeper. He was, in fact, a disbarred lawyer. He'd lost his license 7 years prior for embezzling funds from elderly clients' estates. He had served 2 years in prison. He was a predator who specialized in preying on the vulnerable. He was the perfect partner for my son's disgusting plan. Brenda pushed a small digital recorder across the desk. "This is the hard part, Eleanor," she said softly. She had, through her contacts, obtained recordings of Michael's calls to the loan sharks. I put on the headphones, my hands trembling. I heard my son's voice, not the confident man I knew, but the high-pitched, terrified whimper of a cornered animal. He was begging for more time. Then another voice came on the line. It was gravelly, cold, and devoid of any human emotion. "Christmas, Mikey," the voice rasped. "You got till Christmas. After that, the interest goes way up. We start with your wife's pretty face, you understand me? Then we come for your mother's nice, quiet house." They knew about me. They were threatening me. My son's weakness had put a target on my back. I tore the headphones off, a strangled cry escaping my lips. This was real. This wasn't just about losing money. Our lives were in danger. Brenda let me compose myself, pushing a box of tissues toward me. "There's more," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We ran a full asset check on Michael and Sarah." She turned a page in the file. It was a list of recent transactions from a local high-end pawn shop and a private auction house that specialized in antiques and jewelry. I saw dates, descriptions of items, and the pitifully small amounts they had received in return. I scanned the list, my blood turning to ice. A gentleman's 1968 Patek Philippe wristwatch. A string of Mikimoto pearls with a diamond clasp. An oil painting portrait of a woman in a blue dress, circa 1920. My breath hitched. The watch had been Robert's, a gift from his father, my husband's most prized possession. The pearls were my mother's, the ones I was planning to give to Sarah on her 40th birthday. The painting was of my grandmother. It had hung over the fireplace in my living room for my entire life. But that was impossible. The watch was in my safe deposit box. The pearls were in my jewelry box upstairs. And the painting was hanging over the fireplace right now. A sickening realization began to dawn on me. A truth so monstrous I could barely comprehend it. Brenda saw the look on my face. Her eyes were full of pity. "Eleanor," she said softly, "I think you need to go home and take a very close look at your valuables." The final, most devastating shoe was about to drop. I drove home in a daze, Brenda's words echoing in my head. The familiar tree-lined streets of my neighborhood felt alien. The stately homes like silent witnesses to a crime I was only just discovering. My own house, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a mausoleum. A place where memories had been murdered and replaced with forgeries. I walked through the front door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My eyes went immediately to the fireplace. There it was. The portrait of my grandmother, her serene smile and kind eyes looking down at me. But was it? I stepped closer, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. The brushstroke seemed flatter, the colors less vibrant. There was a small, almost imperceptible sheen to it that shouldn't have been there. It was a print. A high-quality, framed print, but a print nonetheless. The original, with its rich texture and depth, was gone. Sold. For what? A few more bets? A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I gripped the back of a chair for support. How long had it been gone? Weeks? Months? How many times had I sat in this very room with my son and his wife, laughing, sharing stories, while they looked at this fake, this insult, knowing what they had done? My legs felt like lead as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. My hands shook as I reached for my jewelry box, a beautiful cherrywood chest that Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary. I opened the lid. There, nestled on the velvet lining, was the string of Mikimoto pearls. They looked perfect, but when I lifted them they felt too light, too warm. Real pearls have a distinct coolness, a certain heft. These felt like plastic. I held them up to the light. The lustrous, deep glow was gone, replaced by a cheap, superficial shine. Fakes. Worthless imitations. The son I loved, the daughter-in-law I had welcomed into my heart, had crept into my room, into my private space, and stolen a piece of my mother's legacy, leaving this cheap trinket in its place. The final stop was my bank. I drove there on autopilot, my mind numb. I greeted the bank manager, a kind man who had known me for years, with a strained smile. He led me to the vault. With trembling fingers, I unlocked my safe deposit box and slid out the metal container. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was my husband's Patek Philippe watch. Picked it up. Felt right. The weight was correct. The gold shone. A small, foolish wave of relief washed over me. Maybe I was wrong about this one. Maybe this at least they hadn't touched. I took it to a trusted jeweler on King Street, a man who had serviced the watch for Robert for over 30 years. He took one look at it through his loupe, then looked at me, his face etched with sympathy. "Eleanor," he said gently, "this is a remarkably good replica. A super clone, they call them. But it's not your husband's watch. The movement is all wrong." That was it. That was the final breaking straw. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't about a gambling addiction. This was a violation of the most sacred kind. They hadn't just stolen things. They had stolen my past. They had stolen Robert's memory, my mother's love, my grandmother's legacy. They had systematically hollowed out my life, replacing precious, irreplaceable treasures with cheap, empty copies, all while smiling to my face, eating at my table and accepting my love. The grief I had felt before was burned away, replaced by something white-hot and pure, rage. A rage so profound it clarified everything. There would be no more second chances. There would be no more maternal weakness. The part of me that had wanted to save my son died in that jewelry store. I walked out into the bright Charleston sun, no longer a grieving mother but a woman scorned. They had underestimated me. They saw me as a doting, slightly dotty old woman, an obstacle to be drugged and discarded. They had no idea of the strength forged by a lifetime of building a business, of loving a husband, of raising a child. They had started this war, but I was going to be the one to finish it. I drove straight back to Brenda's office, the fake watch feeling like a lead weight in my purse. I walked in, my expression so grim that she stood up immediately. "They replaced them," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "They replaced everything with fakes." Brenda just nodded slowly, her eyes full of a grim understanding. "I want to destroy them, Brenda," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Not just stop them. I want them to face justice for every last thing they have done." She looked at me, a long assessing gaze. Then a slow, determined smile spread across her face. "Good," she said. "Because I know exactly how we're going to do it. This isn't about money anymore. This is about war." The next phase was not about emotion, it was about strategy. My war room became David Chen's immaculate, book-lined office. The weapons we chose were not knives or poisons, but legal documents, corporate structures, and the full unyielding weight of the law. My rage, once a wildfire, was now being channeled and forged into an impenetrable fortress. "They're coming for everything, David," I said, my voice calm and steady as I laid out the entirety of Brenda's findings on his conference table. The financial reports, the pawn shop receipts, the photos of the forgeries. "Their plan is to declare me incompetent and seize control. We need to make my assets untouchable." David, ever the professional, listened intently, his fingers steepled. When I finished, he didn't offer condolences. He offered a plan. "They're using a blunt instrument, Eleanor. A fraudulent power of attorney. We're going to build a multi-layered defense so sophisticated that even a legitimate document would fail, let alone a forgery." For the next 2 weeks we worked tirelessly. It started with my personal accounts and properties. We implemented what David called a juridical fortress. Every single asset was restructured. My primary bank accounts were converted into a trust that required not one, but 2 independent trustees to sign off on any withdrawal over $1,000. David was one, and my fiercely protective younger sister in Atlanta was the other. For my real estate holdings, the rental properties in downtown Charleston and on Kiowa Island, we filed new deeds. Any sale or transfer would now require not only my signature, but my physical presence at the closing, along with a notarized affidavit from a board-certified geriatric psychiatrist confirming my mental competence, a psychiatrist chosen by David's firm, not my family. Furthermore, it required a biometric thumbprint scan, a system David had installed in his office specifically for high-net-worth clients worried about exactly this kind of elder fraud. "They'll have their fake lawyer and their fake documents," David said, a grim smile on his face as he reviewed the paperwork. "They'll be trying to pick a padlock with a toothpick. It's impossible." But the masterstroke, the move that elevated our defense from brilliant to unbeatable, was my idea. It came to me late one night, as I was staring at the fake painting of my grandmother. They had stolen my family's past. I would safeguard my future by creating a new legacy. "David," I said at our next meeting, "I want to start a foundation." I explained my vision. A charitable organization dedicated to providing legal aid and safe housing for elderly individuals who were victims of financial abuse by their own families. A cause born directly from my own pain. David's eyes lit up. "Eleanor, that's brilliant. It's not just a noble cause. It's the ultimate legal shield." On October 25th, the Beacon Foundation was officially incorporated. And then we made the big move. I transferred 80% of my net worth, my stocks, my investment portfolio, the ownership of my rental properties, directly into the foundation. I was no longer the direct owner. I appointed myself as the foundation's non-salaried executive director, and David and my sister as board members. I still controlled the assets, but they were no longer my assets. They belonged to the charity. Now look at their plan through this lens, David explained, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied expression. If they drug you and force you to sign a power of attorney, they're no longer attempting to steal from their confused mother. They are attempting to defraud a registered 501(c)(3) charitable organization. The state and federal penalties for that are exponentially more severe. We're talking major felonies, long prison sentences, and the kind of media attention that would ruin them forever. A judge would throw the book at them. It was perfect. It was a shield and a sword all in one. My wealth was no longer a target for their greed. It was a testament to my survival. It was a beacon, just like the name suggested, for others lost in the same darkness I was in. I walked out of David's office that day feeling a sense of power I hadn't felt in months. They thought I was a sheep, ready for slaughter. They had no idea I was a shepherd, building a fortress to protect not just myself, but an entire flock. The legal framework was complete. The trap was built and baited. Now all I needed was to bring in the hunters who would help me spring it. Brenda knew just the person. "Detective Miller is the man you want to see," Brenda said over the phone a few days later. "He heads the Economic Crimes Unit at the Charleston PD. He's old school, meticulous, and he has a special kind of hatred for con artists who prey on seniors. I've already given him a discreet heads up. He's expecting your call." Walking into the police station felt surreal. This was a place for criminals, for victims of random violence. I was a victim of something far more intimate. Detective Miller was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, with a kind, weary face and eyes that had seen the worst of humanity. He led me to a small private interview room, a place that felt a world away from the chaos of the main precinct. He had a file on his desk already. My file. Brenda had been thorough. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice a calm, reassuring baritone. "Brenda Russo speaks very highly of you. Please tell me everything in your own words." For the second time, I recounted the entire sordid story, from the overheard conversation to the fake heirlooms. I played him the recording Brenda had obtained of Michael begging the loan shark. I showed him the pictures of the forgeries. I explained the legal fortress David and I had constructed, and the creation of the Beacon Foundation. He listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. "Ma'am," he said, shaking his head. "In all my years, this is one of the most cold-blooded, premeditated cases of elder abuse I've ever come across. Your son and his wife aren't just in financial trouble. They are criminals. And we are going to treat them as such." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me weep. I was believed. I was supported. I was no longer alone in this fight. "Your counterplan is brilliant," Miller continued. "The foundation, the legal shields. It's a prosecutor's dream. But to make this case airtight, to ensure they face the maximum penalty, we need to catch them in the act. We need undeniable proof of their intent on the night of December 10th. And so, we began to plan the sting operation. My comfortable, historic home was about to be turned into a stage for the final act of this tragedy. Over the next few weeks, under the guise of a security system upgrade I'd been meaning to do for ages, a team of plainclothes tech officers from Miller's unit visited my house. They were meticulous. They installed state-of-the-art, nearly invisible cameras in my living room and kitchen. The tiny lens in the book spine was theirs. The one in the silk flower was theirs. They placed a high-fidelity audio recorder inside a mantelpiece clock. They gave me a small, discreet personal audio recorder to carry in my pocket, and a panic button disguised as a key fob. "You press this the moment that fake lawyer puts a pen in your hand," Miller instructed. "That's our signal to move in. We'll have a team in an unmarked van parked a block away, monitoring the audio and video feeds in real time. 2 more officers will be on foot, posing as tourists. You will not be alone for a second." The hardest part was his final instruction. "Eleanor," he said, using my first name for the first time. "For this to work, you have to be the most convincing actress of your life. You have to play the part of the confused, frail mother they expect to see. You have to let them get all the way to the finish line. Let them put the drug tea in your hand. Let them uncap the pen. We need them to commit the final act." Can you do that? I looked him straight in the eye, the image of my mother's stolen pearls flashing in my mind. Detective, I said, my voice steady. I've been rehearsing for this role for 4 months. I'm ready for my premiere. The legal walls were built. The law was on my side. The trap was set. All that was left was to survive the performance. The weeks leading up to December 10th were the longest of my life. Living a double life was exhausting. On the outside, I was the slightly doting, increasingly forgetful mother. I'd misplace my reading glasses when Michael was over. I'd ask Sarah to repeat details of a story she'd just told me. I played the part so well I sometimes scared myself. They were swallowing it whole, their confidence in my decline growing with each passing day. Inside, I was a general preparing for battle. One of the most painful preparations was the final official severing of ties. I met with David Chan one last time to formally amend my will and testament. For 40 years, that document had listed one primary beneficiary, Michael Vance. Are you absolutely certain, Eleanor? David asked gently, the new document resting between us on the polished table. Once this is signed and filed, there's no going back. Your inheritance will be legally redirected. I picked up the heavy pen, my heart aching with the ghost of a love that was now dead. The son I was leaving my inheritance to doesn't exist anymore, David, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He was an illusion. The man who is planning to drug me on my birthday is a stranger. And I don't leave my life's work to strangers. I signed my name. The new will was devastatingly clear. Upon my death, my entire personal estate, the 20% not already in the foundation, would be split between 2 charities. One dedicated to gambling addiction recovery programs, and the other, the National Center for Victims of Crime. Michael's name was gone, erased as if he had never been born. He wouldn't get a single dime. With the legal and strategic preparations complete, I focused on the performance. Brenda provided me with crucial information about the sedatives Frank Miller was likely to procure. Probably something like lorazepam, she explained. It can have a slightly bitter aftertaste. You usually drink chamomile with honey, right? That would be enough to mask it. It was another small detail. Another piece of the puzzle that confirmed their meticulous, cruel planning. A week before D-Day, I decided to hold a dress rehearsal. I invited Michael and Sarah over for an impromptu Sunday dinner. I was just feeling a little lonely. I told them over the phone, my voice pitched to sound fragile. They arrived, bearing a bottle of wine and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The tension coming off them was palpable. Michael was constantly checking his phone, his leg jiggling under the table. Sarah was jumpy, dropping a fork with a loud clatter and then apologizing profusely. She avoided my gaze all night. It was guilt. I could see it eating her alive. Not enough to stop her, but enough to make her clumsy. I'm so looking forward to your birthday next week, Mom, Michael said as I served dessert, his voice oozing false sentiment. Just a quiet celebration here at home. Like when I was a kid. The words were like daggers. How could he reminisce about a childhood I had filled with love while actively plotting to destroy me? How could he sit at my table eating my food and lie so brazenly? I simply smiled, a sad, knowing smile he mistook for nostalgic affection. That will be lovely, dear, I said. The rehearsal was a success. They were completely convinced. They saw a frail old woman, lost in her memories, an easy target ripe for the picking. They had no idea they were the ones being observed, their every nervous tick and guilty glance catalogued and analyzed. The night before the final confrontation, December 9th, I did one last thing. I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter. Michael, it began. By the time you read this, your world will have fallen apart. And you will have no one to blame but yourself. You will have discovered that your mother is not the weak, confused woman you believed her to be. You will have learned that a mother's love is not unconditional, and its limits are called dignity and survival. For months I have known everything. I know about the gambling, the loan sharks, the plan to drug me. I know about you selling your father's watch and my mother's pearls. The person you will try to betray tomorrow is not your mother. She is a woman who has been preparing to bring you to justice. What you are about to do is not just a crime. It is the murder of our family. And for that I can never forgive you. I sealed the letter and gave it to David to hold. It would be delivered to Michael in jail. My tears fell onto the envelope, baptizing it in a sorrow too deep for words. The planning was over. The stage was set. Tomorrow night, my son would arrive to celebrate my birthday. He would be coming to destroy me. He had no idea he was walking into his own destruction. The morning of December 10th, my birthday, dawned gray and overcast. A perfect mirror for the storm brewing in my heart. Detective Miller called at 8 a.m. All teams are in position, Eleanor. We are a go. Just live your day. We'll be watching. The day crawled by. I tried to read the paper, but the words blurred. I tried to do a crossword puzzle, but my mind was a whirlwind of tactics and grief. At 7:30 p.m., as dusk settled over Charleston, I began my final preparations. In the kitchen, I set out 2 identical porcelain teacups on a silver tray. My special chamomile blend. In one I placed a spoonful of honey. In the other 2. A simple visual cue that would be my salvation. The cup with 2 spoonfuls of honey, the one designed to mask a bitter taste, was placed on the left side of the tray. My cup was on the right. At precisely 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. There they were. Michael holding a ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne, and Sarah, clutching a bouquet of my favorite stargazy lilies. Their scent suddenly funereal. Their smiles were bright, brittle, and utterly false. "Happy birthday, Mom," Michael boomed, enveloping me in a hug that felt like a cage. 70 years young. Can you believe it? I was 68, not 70. The fact that he got my age wrong tonight of all nights was a small, cruel, and perfect detail. "Thank you, sweetheart," I murmured into his shoulder, playing my part. The dinner was an agonizing performance. They chattered about their work, about friends I knew they were lying about, all while I pushed food around my plate, my stomach in knots. I watched Michael check his watch. 9 o'clock. 9:15. He was waiting for the time. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice sweet as syrup, "you look tired. Why don't I make you your chamomile tea? It will help you relax." "That would be lovely, dear," I said. This was it. The curtain was rising on the final act. Sarah went into the kitchen. Michael followed on the pretense of getting some water. I waited exactly 30 seconds, then stood up slowly. "I think I'll just go freshen up before my tea," I announced to the empty room, my voice loud enough for them to hear. I didn't go to the powder room. I crept down the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I peered around the corner, through the sliver of the open kitchen door. I saw it all. Sarah stood with her back to the door, her head bent over the silver tray. I saw her fumbling in her purse, her movements jerky and nervous. She pulled out a small folded piece of paper. She carefully emptied a fine white powder into the teacup on the left, the one with 2 spoonfuls of honey. She stirred it quickly, her hands shaking so badly she slopped a little tea onto the tray. They brought the tray into the living room, Sarah placing it carefully on the coffee table. "Here you go, Eleanor," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "Nice and hot." I sat down in my armchair, feigning a weary sigh. "Oh, that looks wonderful. Michael, dear, could you be a darling and pass me my cup?" He reached for the tray, his eyes fixed on the cup to the left. The poison cup. But as he lifted it, I made my move. "Oh, wait, honey," I said, a note of gentle confusion in my voice. "That one has too much honey for my taste. Sarah knows I'm trying to cut back. I'll take the other one." Before he could react, I reached out and took the cup from the right side of the tray, the clean cup. I saw a flash of panic in his eyes, a split second of pure terror. He exchanged a frantic look with Sarah. Their plan had hit a snag. But they couldn't expose themselves. What could they say? "No, Mom, you must drink the poison one." I took a slow, deliberate sip from my cup. "Perfect," I said. Michael was left holding the drugged cup. He couldn't just put it down. That would be suspicious. Trapped, he sat down, placing the cup on the end table beside him. A few minutes later, feigning a cough, he picked it up and took a small sip. He had to maintain the illusion. And so began the longest 20 minutes of my life. I started my performance letting my eyelids droop, slurring a word here and there. I watched as the real sedatives began to take hold of my son. His movements became sluggish. His blinks grew longer. His own speech began to thicken. At exactly 9:30, the doorbell rang. Sarah, looking relieved, ushered in Frank Miller. The final player had arrived. He set his briefcase down, All false smiles and professional courtesy. He spread the documents on the table. They were exactly what Brenda had described. A complete, irrevocable transfer of all my assets to a corporation controlled by Michael. Now, Mrs. Vance, Frank began. As your son has explained, given some of your recent memory lapses, it was then I made my final move. With a theatrical oops, I let my hand go limp, knocking my teacup over. Hot tea spilled across the fraudulent documents, smudging the ink. Oh dear me! I cried, my voice a perfect imitation of a confused old woman. How clumsy! I am so sorry, mister. What was your name again? As they scrambled to mop up the mess with napkins, my hand slipped into my pocket. My thumb found the smooth, cool plastic of the panic button. Pressed it. Hard. In the ensuing chaos, I turned to Michael, my eyes wide with feigned panic. Mikey, I don't understand. Why do I need to sign away the house? This man says I have memory problems. My son, his mind clouded by the drugs meant for me, his desperation mounting, finally made the fatal mistake I had been waiting for. Mom, just sign it, he begged, his voice a thick, desperate slur. Listen to me. I owe dangerous people a lot of money. If I don't pay them, they're going to kill me. They're going to kill Sarah. Sarah gasped. Michael, shut up. Now she'll know we put something in her tea. It was a full confession. Both of them. Recorded. Just then a sound began to cut through the night. Faint at first, then growing rapidly louder. A rising, piercing wail. Police sirens. They were getting closer. Michael's drug-addled brain finally registered the sound. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with terror. What is that? He stammered. Mom. Why are the police coming here? I stood up, all traces of frailty and confusion gone. I looked down at the son who had betrayed me, my voice as cold and clear as ice. They're coming here, Michael, because I called them, I said. And there's something you need to understand about the tea you just drank. It was the tea you meant for me. The front door burst open with a crash that seemed to shake the entire house. Detective Miller entered first, his badge held high, followed by 6 uniformed officers. The expressions on Michael's and Sarah's faces, a cocktail of disbelief, horror and dawning comprehension, was a sight I will never forget. Frank Miller looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting for an escape route that didn't exist. Michael Vance, Sarah Vance, Frank Miller, Detective Miller announced, his voice booming in the suddenly silent room. You are all under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, aggravated assault, and illegal administration of a controlled substance. The chaos that followed was a blur of handcuffs, shouted rights, and pathetic denials. Michael, still struggling against the effects of the sedatives, tried to appeal to me one last time. Tears streamed down his face. Mom, please. He sobbed as an officer cuffed his hands behind his back. I'm your son. I'm your family. We can fix this. I swear I'll pay back every penny. I looked at the broken man who was my child, the one who had planned to leave me with nothing, and felt a profound aching emptiness. The love was gone, replaced by a vast, cold pity. The son I raised would never have done this, Michael, I said, my voice quiet but firm. My family died 4 months ago on that porch. I'm just here to bury the bodies. The evidence was overwhelming. The toxicology report confirmed the low razepam in Michael's system. The recordings captured their full confessions. The forged documents, stained with tea, were the physical proof of their intent. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. 9 months later, I sat in the back of a courtroom and watched their fates be sealed. Sarah, in a desperate bid for leniency, testified against both Michael and Frank. She received a 3-year suspended sentence and probation. Frank Miller, a repeat offender, was sentenced to 5 years in state prison with no chance of parole. And Michael, my son, the judge looked at him with undisguised contempt. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, in order to pay a fine for the emotional distress he had caused. As they led him away, he looked back at me one last time, his eyes pleading. I met his gaze, held it for a moment, and then I turned away. It was over. The aftermath was a period of cleansing. I sold the house on Broad Street, the beautiful prison of my past. Each room held a ghost, every corner a memory now tainted by betrayal. I sold it and I never looked back. With the proceeds, I bought a bright, airy condo in a quieter community, with a balcony overlooking the ocean. The rhythmic crash of the waves became my new lullaby. I poured my heart, my soul, and my resources into the Beacon Foundation. We opened our first office. We hired lawyers, social workers, and counselors, and we began to help people. Our first case was a man named George, an 82-year-old widower whose granddaughter had drained his retirement account. We fought for him. We won. We helped dozens, then hundreds of elderly victims reclaim their lives and their dignity. My pain had been forged into a purpose. About a year after the trial, I met James. He was a volunteer at a local charity event, a retired history professor with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He too was a widower. He too had a story of family betrayal, a bitter divorce from a first wife who had tried to take everything. We found solace in our shared scars, a quiet understanding that required few words. We started with walks on the beach, then dinners, then a comfortable companionship that blossomed into a deep, peaceful love. I received letters from Michael in prison, 31 of them over 2 years. They piled up in a shoebox in my closet, all of them unopened. My therapist asked if I wasn't curious. I don't need to read his excuses, I told her. My closure wasn't in his apology. It was in my own survival. On the second anniversary of that terrible night, I took the shoebox of unopened letters to the beach. One by one, I tore them into pieces, letting the Charleston wind carry the confetti of my past out over the Atlantic Ocean until it was gone. I was finally free. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I believe in the power of speaking our truth. My question for you is this: what is the single most important lesson you've learned about trust and family? Please share your wisdom in the comments below. Your story might be the beacon someone else needs to see in the dark. And if my story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more. You are not alone.